Yeonhee Dreamer Plays.
Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we'll be looking at Guild War. Guild War is a 3v3 PvP mode and each season lasts for 6 weeks with wars happening every 2 days. You will need to set a total of 5 defense teams in which pets and heroes cannot be repeated. Similarly, you will have 5 offense opportunities where heroes and pets cannot be repeated as well. This means we are looking at a total of 15 main units for defense and a much larger possibility for offense. In Guild War, you will see many towers here. It is divided into the outer bailey and the inner bailey and the castle. Those who have played 7 Knights 2 may find this system familiar. You only need to clear 3 out of 5 of the outer bailies to open the inner bailies, and then to clear 2 out of the 3 inner bailies to open the castle. But before we look at team comps, let's discuss about how Guild War being 3v3 and also having some agency of control makes it different and more interesting than regular PvP. Being a 3v3 mode where you can choose your enemies, it can allow for more heroes to be used, such as your 3-man AoE units, because now it basically hits all. It also allows for immunity heroes to play a very important role, because you encounter more varied comps with CC units split across different teams, and heroes like Chloe, Jin, Sarah, Leo all can see use in offense to counter certain defense heroes. And also because there are lesser heroes on the field, basic attacks become relatively more targeted in a way, so the chance of striking a specific enemy technically increases. So heroes with damage nullification, for example like Yeonhee and Dylan's and Jury, may lose their shields even faster because of this. Also, heroes with multiple status effects like Jave can be very good in defense if put with the right heroes, because it can force the enemy to run heroes like Evan and Yui to counter him, and this can also affect their preferred team composition choices. Nya is also a good hero with AoE statuses, and you can see good use here. But being a 3v3 mode, it may not always be a good thing for some teams and heroes, such as Death and Karma. Why I say so is because these comps and heroes benefit from having more support rather than less. Currently, losing any member of the Death team, from Rosie, Chris, Nox and Aquila, only reduces the possibility of landing widespread death. While some people may see this to highlight the importance of Rosie and Nox and Aquila instead, because they serve to increase the death rate, while Chris is just a death unit. Karma is another unit that seems tricky because with lesser support, his tankiness is lower. So previously, if you were using him with a crit build for PvP, it may require you to opt for a more defensive set of gear, sacrificing damage for Guild War, and this may not be a good thing. So let us look at some of the best comps you can run in the meta at the moment. I have wiped out my defense here so we can team build together. I'll first talk about the best options possible and then look at the alternatives for newer players who may not have a variety of heroes. Generally, in looking at this screen, I will immediately put down the core units like Kyle and Mercure because they require 3 specific allies to work, so naturally they have to be in separate teams. Then comes who you want to pair them with. The Kyle team generally consists of Amelia and Kagura for high damage output. The idea here is to shut down the enemy team with status and then wipe with Kyle. The good thing about Amelia, who was designed for Guild War, is that her status effect Concussion has no immunity unit to counter, and she has a base debuff percentage higher than Kagura's Petrified. So ideally you will want her to go first, and then you can proceed with Kyle's attacks. If you don't have Amelia here, you can also run Dylan's and either use Silence or Petrify first. The pet I will opt to use here will be the physical attack pet, or if you want, you can also go with the crit pet. Some people may opt for Cult instead of Kagura here to have higher effect hit rate for Amelia to land the concussion better. And as for the Mercure team, his teammate options are plenty, including Yeonhee, Rin, Vanessa, Jury, Yuxun. I will opt for Rin and Yuxun here. Yuxun helps Mercure a lot in terms of landing the status effects because he does increase effect hit rate, while Rin is just a great damage dealer to compensate for the lack of damage from the other two. The reason why I don't use Yeonhee here is because I feel that Yeonhee can form her own separate team because she is simply that strong, and for those of you who don't have Yuxun or Rin, of course put whatever good magic units you have built to complete this magic team. Skill queue wise, I will start with Rin's Confusion, because it is a very powerful status effect that essentially makes all the enemies not crit, and also ensures that their next hit will not have any debuffs. And once that is applied, I will go with Yushin's Paralyze, or you can use Mercure's Stun, both of which have equal debuff percentage, but perhaps Yushin's Paralyze is better, because unless the enemy brings Victoria, there is no way to be immune against Paralyze compared to Stun. Many people will definitely be running Evans and have their Evans build, so this skill may end up being a useless skill. You can also queue Mercure's Magic Reflux skill once everything is set up, so that you can start crippling their team off. Or you can go with more damage output from Rin as well from her bottom skill. In terms of pet, I'll be using a CC pet. In this case, I'll be using Kree. If you don't have Kree, you can actually go with Nikki. Nikki can increase the effect hit rate for this particular team as well. Alternatively, you can go for tank pets, okay, or crit pets here if you do have, so that you can land more damage from Rin as well. As for my Yeonhee team, because she is more damage oriented, I will actually use Vanessa here with her. Generally, Vanessa is both a CC unit and a damage buffer, but since we have limited space, I prefer using her with a proper damage dealing team rather than using her with Mercure on a status team, which doesn't do much damage. As for the last option here, I will go with either Rosie or Drury for my particular box. Rosie provides that revive which can come in clutch, while Drury applies Soul Death, and then nuking with Yeonhee after that also feels pretty good. So in this case, I'll go with Drury, but of course I know many people don't have these 7 Knights of Ol, and you can actually go with another magic unit of your choice, okay, or even a healer will be fine as well, because Yeonhee is just that strong. You can even go with Valika if you have Valika, or you can even go with Nia or Miho, because all these serve to boost Yeonhee's damage output very well. As for the pet here, because this is a magic oriented damage team, I'll be going with the magic attack pet. And as for the skill queue, I'll be using Vanessa's bottom skill first for skill cooldown increase, because this actually has a higher debuff percentage chance compared to her paralyzed skill, which only has a 40% chance. Alternatively, if you want, you can also start with Soul Death to land the Soul Death and then proceed to lock the enemies. But of course, I think if your team tends to have a higher speed, you can actually lock the enemies first and then cast Soul Death and then nuke with Yeonhee. This is also going to be possible because they're not going to do anything to you after you lock their skills. The next team I will go for would probably be one centered around Teo. Okay, because Teo deserves his own team, not because he is Teo, but because having both Carl and Teo on the same team feels too much. And you are probably better off separating the two damage dealers to have their own comps, because in Guild War, if you run a defense team without a consistent damage dealer, you are basically telling the enemy that you want to be overrun. Teo's comp is very flexible since he doesn't have any requirements, so I will just be throwing in Dylan's and Eileen to buff Teo's damage output. If your Dylan's is already used, you can also run Ace or Biscuit here as well. Ultimately, you want to push Teo's damage as high as possible. Okay, Callahan is also a possible option to replace Teo or to be with Teo, okay, if you run out of options. So the pet for the Teo team, I have chosen it as Dillo for crit because my Teo isn't T6. If your Teo is already T6, you can actually go for different damage oriented pets like Ritual, or even those without Ritual can go for Kroa, can also use Little Fang if you really need to. For skill queue wise, I will start with Eileen, and then I will go with Teo's bottom skill and then Dylan's Silence. The reason why I queue my skill like this is because just in case they bring Chloe to counter my Eileen, hopefully if they don't counter my Dylan's as well, then he can land the Silence later to shut the enemy's team further. On that note, I think it's a good time to talk about why Universal and Support and Tank units are not heroes to prioritize using in Guild War. The main reason would be speed. Because Guild War is a targeted form of PvP, enemies can literally adjust their gear on their units with very weird gear pieces with high speed, just to outspeed you and cripple your skill queue. Similarly, of course, you can do the same on your defense. But Universal Tank and Support heroes generally have a lower speed stat than magic and physical units, so the likelihood of going second could be much higher. So unless the support or universal unit brings something powerful to the table, then it is better to avoid using them. Speaking of powerful supports, we can't forget Platoon. Platoon is one of the SSS tier units in PvP right now, and he certainly can play a huge role in Guild War as well. We will be using the 4-1 formation for him, like in PvP, so that he'll get hit more often because front lines tend to get hit more often than the back line. And by getting him hit more often, you will also be doing more fixed damage back to the enemies. His common comrade is Cult, because having that camouflage buff on her lets her withstand crits and status effects, letting her hold her ground, while Platoon tanks damage and also deals fixed damage. Cult is also primarily here for CC, because this team, other than relying on Platoon's fixed damage, CC can be an alternative because this team's focus is definitely not on doing big damage. A good third unit is Phi, but sadly she didn't come home. Phi is actually also good in applying your status effects like burn, and she also has a chance of executing the enemy because Platoon does do fixed damage and can very easily reduce the HP of your enemies to below 30%, where Phi can actually just snipe them off. So that's also a very cohesive team. But if you don't have Phi, like me, you can use a healer like Alice who gives the team defense buffs, or you can also run Rudy here to just reduce the damage your entire team takes. So since your speed is already going to be low due to Platoon, it doesn't really matter here which unit you use here as long as they increase the bulkiness of this particular team. Ultimately, you want this team to survive as long as possible. Another option could be Nia, because Nia does have, skill cooldown and shock, skill cooldown increase and shock, and she can benefit from Cult's passive as well. So ideal pet for here will be a defensive pet like Pike if you have. Pike actually gives effect resistance and defense. If you don't have Pike, you can actually go for Rue as well. You can also use Halepin. My Halepin gives more defense than and block rate to my team, so that's also one possible option to run, or Paragon as well. In terms of skill queue, I'll actually be using Cult's bottom skill and top skill, because they have to be used in this order for maximum efficiency. Alternatively, you can start with Alice's bottom skill to buff and also provide continuous healing to sustain your team a bit better, and then proceed to use this combination. So in terms of gear, I'm going to just flash my gear on the screen. Okay, you guys can take a look at what kind of gears I've given my heroes. For Amelia, she's on the effect hit set. For Kagura, she's on the block set. I would go for attack set if possible, but I don't have that. For Carl, I will have the crit set on him, and if I do have the damage dealt set, that will also be a good option. For Yushin, the effect hit set. For Mercure, the block set with effect hit rolls. For Rin, she's on the crit set. Jewelry with effect resistance, because I need her to go first, and effect resistance actually gives your unit that goes first. Effect resistance actually gives your unit turn 1 immunity to any CC, so I really need her to land the soul death as well as she can. And then I will have Vanessa on the block set with effect hit rolls as well, and then Yeonhee's on the crit set, Lillian's on the crit set, Aideen on the block set with effect hit rolls, and then Teo is on the crit set, Platoon's on the block set, Cult is on the crit set. I would personally probably opt for attack set or effect hit. I'll probably opt for attack set or weakness hit or block with effect hit rolls, depending on how you want your Cult to withstand damage or deal damage. And then Alice is on the block set as well. So with that, I'll save my team, and then we'll look at some other alternatives, because some of you may want to run tank comps or death comps. So tank comps can actually be very toxic. So one particular tank comp will be Rudy with 2 healers, being Alice and Lina. You not only have a lot of heals, you also take very little damage. You can gear this team either with very high effect resist, so that you will resist CCs and that completely stop your team, but you do risk getting crit on. Or if you run a block set comp, you can withstand crit damage, but you can risk getting your team shut down. For the skill queue for this would be to link, to stun, and then defense boost, or even heal, okay, depending on which one you think your heroes will need more. The reason why I put stun as a second skill is because allowing Rudy to go in to stun a unit while the enemy still has a planned skill queue could be more beneficial than when the skill queue becomes random. The only drawback for this particular team is that unless you have very high block rate of 95 to 100%, Buff removals, death offense teams, status effect, and very high crit damage dealers have a chance to cripple your team. And then we also have death team, basically something like Rosie, Aquila, and Chris. Death team isn't a great defense option, I'm sorry to say, because a single Leo is all it takes to counter them, and they don't do much damage. So if the enemy brings a Leo and a healer and a DPS, your death team is basically a free win. There is also another team very specific for Guild War and Total War, and that is the Orly team. Orly has been a unit that hasn't seen much use at all in PvP due to her unique way of buffing only frontline magic allies. So she is tend to be used in a 1-4 formation with 2 other magic allies, and she's at the back. And one particular hero that is used commonly with her is Sylvester. I've seen them being used a lot together. So I guess heroes that don't get used much come together to form, somewhat like a consolation group. Yeah, this is an option if you really run out of options. So we never talked about other legendary rare units being used here. So based on what we have, let us see which units can be alternatives for these particular comps that I've already put. As mentioned, heroes with 3-man AoEs like Taka, Ruri, Bidam, Miho can potentially shine in this match, but there are some conditions. And this is predominantly still a PvP mode, so if heroes like these lack any sort of utility or have no damage prevention on their passive, they do risk getting killed straight away. So someone like Miho, you can actually use her with the Yeonhee team, and unfortunately like Ruri and Taka and Bidam, you may tend to form a team specifically for them because they are the damage dealers and they will need to use whatever support you have for them. They don't have much utility, so you have to provide them with whatever utility you can get. So if you're already running out of units, this can be something you can put together. As an option, right? Another decent legendary unit who can be slotted into magic teams is Daisy. Her magic attack buff can help raise the damage output of your magic team. And Valika also has some utility in terms of applying magic vulnerability as well. For rare heroes, I feel that Evan could be slotted into the Platin comp as a third unit to provide bulk, which is crucial for this particular team. Ariel can be placed on the magic team if you need more damage output, and she also has the potential to increase the enemy's miss chance, so to help mitigate some damage. I've also seen Yui being used in the early days of KR Guild War. Yui at T12 actually has very good bulk against some non-transcended legendary heroes, and she has revive as well, making her very annoying to deal with in defense. And I would use Yui either on the Platin comp or on the tank comp if you do use it. Similarly, if you do have Karin, she has the same function and she can also cleanse debuffs on a single unit. And again, since we have lesser units in Guild War, these form of single target skills are more targeted and won't be misused as easily. And lastly, I think Feng Yan and Jin are great rare units as well, because Feng Yan in particular, he has a damage immunity, so he can actually withstand damage at the start, and he can also cast defense down. Being an attack type, you can slot him into Kao's team if you need. Similar for Jin, he does have a stun as well, and he can apply fixed damage also if that actually helps. So I hope this gives you a better idea of defense teams. Now let's look at offense teams. Offense teams are very varied in this game's Guild War because it depends on what your enemy has used. I'll also talk about how to counter these teams, which I have previously said, to give you a general guideline. Yeonhee teams are generally countered with Sarah. Thanks to her sleep immunity, what you want to do is probably to bring a tank like Evan and also a damage dealer, and that is pretty much how you can just make Yeonhee useless. Your choice of DPSs for this particular team are preferably something with immunity or nullification, because you definitely can expect enemy Yeonhees to open with Yeonhee's hard-hitting AoE. So this can include Teo, T2 Callahan, or even Yeonhee herself. Then for Kagura comps, generally you will want to bring Black Rose or Daisy, because these will let you become immune to Petrify. Kagura comps will almost always use that skill regardless. Sometimes you will see Carl on the same team, so if Carl is with Kagura, then you will probably want a team like Daisy, Yeonhee, or Lena and Rudy. Yeonhee helps shreds Carl's damage nullification right away with her AoE, and then you can use her bottom skill to kill with ease. Generally speaking, if you meet defense comps with CC units like Eileen, Dylan's, always bring the relevant immunity hero, and always have a DPS to dish out damage. Of course, make sure your immunity units have proper gears too and are not just there to shake around for 10 seconds. Also, if you are facing Teo, those with T2 Biscuits will rejoice because Biscuit can be used in offense against Teo comps since she helps resist 5-man AoE damage and also have buff removal, but of course bring another healer or tank for sustain if you do require. And if you face tank teams, Death comes in very handy. But one thing about Death comps is that you want to try your best to see that there are no heroes that cleanse. Otherwise, your Death team can get too holy without Death, especially against Rudy. So one tip is to make your Death team have a very low speed and pray that enemy Rudys will use Link first, because Rudy's Link has a debuff cleanse as well. And once their Rudy has linked, then you can proceed to use your Death skills. Rudy won't be able to cleanse it anymore until he uses his shield again. So this is a potential team to run. Otherwise, you have to potentially brute force against them. Now, I didn't mention units like Carl and Mercure, not because they aren't good in offense, but because they require very specific types of allies. So while their teams are strong, you just have to make sure that whoever you have chosen to face won't easily break through, because a pure attack and magic team tend to have lesser bulk to withstand damage. So this can be a potential team lineup offensive wise that you can use. I know it doesn't look very cohesive, but it's really very specifically targeted to whoever you have chosen to battle. Finally, I have some special mentions. Firstly, Shane and Pascal. Back in the early days of Guild War, in Korea server, I actually used them to kill off enemy units one by one. Depending on your tier of Guild War and how well built your enemies are, you may have a chance to use them as well, especially against enemy teams who have heroes without damage immunity, because they are using single target attacks, and if the enemies have immunities, there is a chance of wasting that attack early on if the immunity is still there. For example, Pascal versus Yushin. But for teams without immunities, Shane and Pascal can easily snipe enemies away one by one. In a way, making such random teams and using such random units can actually help you save units for the other more important teams that you have. Another two special mentions go out to Lee and Helena. Lee and Helena function in very similar ways. While Lee is immune to physical damage when he taunts, Helena is immune to magic damage when she taunts. So both of them can counter some of the very common meta units such as Yeonhee and Carl and Teos, and Mercure, Rins. All these units cannot do damage to them once they have taunted. So they actually provide very good offensive support as tanks, meanwhile while your other units kill off the enemy. They also have other capabilities such as Lee having the HP alteration. He can potentially reduce the HP of your enemies, especially against tank comps, and allow you to kill them off much faster. Helena, on the other hand, she has a cleanse. Okay, she can remove debuffs and also can cast mischance increase on all enemies, potentially allowing you to not receive crits and also to not receive debuffs. Last special mention goes out to none other than Noho. Noho is one of the more underrated offense units in my opinion. She was used at some point in KR Guild War as well, for the very fact that she not only can buff remove, but she can alter two enemies' HP. So if you are meeting a very powerful tank team, you can actually use Noho to help cripple their HP much lower, and you can actually kill them much easier from that certain HP point. And there have been videos made for Noho in Guild War by Korea YouTubers, so definitely an option that you can consider if you are really stuck. Finally, my guildmate has kindly offered to let me show his teams for discussion, and this is the teams he'll be using for our Guild War. So as you can see, his first team is a Death Platoon comp, which is a very unique choice. Keep in mind I mentioned that Death can be countered by Leo easily. However, in this particular case, Death is secondary and in fact a bonus if it lands. In fact, this actually forces enemies to think whether they want to use Leo and break up their potential offense comps or just run them as it is. And even if Death doesn't land, Platoon will be here to do the fixed damage. So this is a particularly challenging team to face. Not only does it have Link from Aquila, it also has Revive, and also because his rule is actually 6-star, it can also be very tanky to deal with. Now in the second team, he uses Teo and Kagura instead of Kao and Kagura. So as I mentioned earlier, against Kagura, you will bring Black Rose to counter her Petrify, and since we have Dylan's here, you probably want to bring Jin. So since we have Black Rose and Jin, who are both attack type heroes, you can actually throw in Kao here to form a 3 attack type team to counter the Kagura Dylan's and also deal very good damage. The third team he uses is Alice, Karma and Rudy. It is a tank team with Pike, so this means that the effect resist is likely to be high. To counter a team like that, Death is possibly the best way, but again, because of high resistance, the hit rate of Death could be affected quite a bit. So if statuses are not an option, then you can potentially brute force through. Actually, Amelia is a good counter for the tank comps because she does land unable to recover on the unit with the highest defense, and she can also land concussion, which they cannot be, immune to. So you will need a multi-hit Guild War offense comp with Amelia to constantly maintain the concussion on them. I may even go as far as to say Pascal could potentially be decent in sniping away units if you meet a not very strong Rudy comp, because when Rudy links, Pascal's huge damage splits across all units, and even if you hit a single enemy that you didn't intend to, the single target damage actually becomes an AoE damage. His fourth team has Carl and has Colt and Amelia as well, so it is both a damage dealing team somewhat with a lot of status as well. And in this case, you probably want a tank like Rudy and a healer like Lina, and also a DPS of your choice. So start the match with Link and heal and then land the damage. Since he has Amelia, it will be a problem if concussion lands, and because there's Colt as well, Amelia's effect hit rate will be pretty high. Colt also has a chance to land bombs and paralyze your team, so in fact this particular composition is rather tricky to deal with since you cannot be completely immune to all these status effects. And finally, his fifth team is a magic based team like I mentioned, so you will want to bring Sarah to counter Yeonhee, and then with Sarah you can perhaps even bring in Evan for stun immunity, and finally a DPS to do the damage. So I hope this video helps give you a guideline and thought process when making Guild War comps, and if you found it helpful, do give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. Stay tuned for more videos. Thank you so much and see you!